as the children make their way to Children's Church, you need to understand that when I came up the back, I left my Bible on the steps, and so I had to go the back way to get in this morning. It happens sometimes. A scripture lesson this morning comes from the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, and it follows along with our interest during this time of Lent in asking what it means to follow Jesus. And in order to understand the power and importance of the events in the life of Jesus and his disciples, we have to be aware that the circumstances surrounding this moment was Jesus having just fed the 5,000. And as you'll remember, Jesus invited his disciples, his followers, into being a part of that process. In fact, they played a central role in being exposed to the 5,000 by the distribution of God's provision. And so as that begins to conclude, Jesus sends his followers, that is his disciples, on their way. They get in a boat and they start to make their way across the lake. And Jesus remains behind and he dismisses the crowds. He sends the crowds on their way and he himself delays long enough to be able to go up the mountain and to pray. And this follows a very tried and true pattern in the life of Jesus' ministry. Because Jesus will minister, and then he'll go meditate, and then he'll move. He'll minister, then he'll meditate, and then he'll move. And there's an immediacy, the scripture tells us, concerning this particular passage. Immediately he made his disciples leave, but he hung back. And then in the middle of the morning, under the cover of darkness, Jesus decides to move. Now, why is that? Did he just decide that, well, it's just easier traveling at night? Any of you have those parents? Oh, let's drive through the night. It's just easier, less traffic. Well, here we have it. Jesus traveling in the night. But it's not because he needs easier path. It's because what he's just done, that is making provision available to these 5,000, has probably upset the local community. Why would you feed 5,000 people and not stay another day to help or to do some follow-up? No. They do the ministry, and then the disciples are told immediately to cross the lake. Why? Because it puts them in a different municipality. In other words, the sheriff's department has no jurisdiction if they cross the lake. And so the disciples are out there, but they can't make progress because there's a headwind. And so there they are, stuck in the middle of the lake with the waves and the wind gathering force. And Jesus begins to make his way out to them by walking on the water. And as he arrives in proximity to them, the disciples catch a glimpse of his figure and take him to be a ghost. Because no human being can walk on water. And so they begin to express their fear. And Jesus shouts to them, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. And Peter's like, "Lord, if it's you, just call me out." Jesus is like, "Well, all right. Peter, come out." And Peter climbs out of the boat, and the scripture says he began to walk towards Jesus. And then he saw the wind and waves. And he began to fear. And in his fear, he began to sink. "Lord, save me," he says. "Lord, save me." And Jesus reached out and took hold of him. And they both entered the boat. And with that, those who were in the boat, they worshiped him. They worshiped him. They had been rescued. Friends, funny thing about following Jesus, inevitably it's going to take us to places that we do not anticipate. To answer the call of Jesus to come is going to take everyone here to places where you're not comfortable. You may not even believe yourself safe. See, here in the ship of salvation, shall we say, we feel safe. And we interact and go about what we take to be the Lord's business, and in doing so, we learn to live and to operate largely without fear. And so here, safe in the ship of salvation, the church, we find ourselves girded up, having grown confident in and with one another as God's people. Friends, this is the boat. This is the boat. Jesus beckons those who would follow him into the choppy waters of the sea. And there it is easy. It's easy to be fearful. It's easy not to want to get out of the boat. It's easy to, in following Jesus, find yourself scared to death, intimidated to inaction, warned off by the signals of what is fearful and unfamiliar. Even though Jesus himself stands there, we begin to sink. I can't tell you how many times I have seen fear grip God's people outside the boat. It's a fearful thing to love one's neighbor It's a fearful thing to love one's enemies. It's a fearful thing to pray for those who persecute you. It's a fearful thing outside the safety of the boat to feed the hungry, to bind up the wounded, to visit the prisoner, to engage with the possessed. I don't know if any of you have ever had experience with those who suffer from opioid addiction. Spend a day in the shoes of a family that has. You talk about scary. So possessed that the most primitive part of their brain is controlled by a chemical over which they have no power, but it has all the power over them. Avoidance is the rule of the day. Funny thing is, best I can tell from reading this book, that's where Jesus is. Somebody that's done a 15 or 20 year stretch in the state penitentiary isn't typically persons to whom we are naturally drawn. But in reading this book, I get the feeling that Jesus is standing right there. Come on out the boat. Teenager, struggling with all manner of challenges. For many, somehow and often, profound challenge. Scary in some ways. Friends suffering the torment of a disintegrating relationship. I don't want to get involved in that. Woo. When I read the book, somehow Jesus is right there. You see, Jesus is standing in the tumult, says the song. Jesus is standing there in the waves and the wind. And not only is he standing there, but he's come there. And all he asks of us is to get out of the boat. And I'm telling you, when you do, you're apt to sink. But it's all right. Because he's not going to let you sink. He's not going to let you go down. He's not going to let you be lost in the depths like Jonah. He's going to take you up and rescue you. He's going to get back in the boat with you. He's going to put his arm around you and say, "Silly you. I got you." And you're going to get back out of the boat again. And next time you're going to make it a little farther. And a little farther. And a little farther. And before you know it, there you'll be. As our deacons prepare to come and assist us in this moment, this table is a like sign to Jesus' call. This table is a welcome to you and to all those who would hear to come and be fed, to be girded up. No matter the magnitude of your own heartbreak, your own sin, your own failings, your own shortcomings, your own challenges, troubles, no matter what the distance you feel from God, He's asked you to come to His table, to be strengthened, so that you too can get out of the boat and be there, ministering to the world.